the story about the farmhand who...
Yes, so Kev from our world, who's just a plain old farmhand, somewhere maybe out back in Aotea somewhere, gets kidnapped by time-raiding slavers and kidnapped into a steampunk reality. He's got no idea what's going on. He's led such a sheltered existence and he's a bit naive, and he's suddenly been thrust into a world where he's got to do all kinds of things like fight krakens and rescue people from jail and all sorts of things that he's never had to do before. And of course along the way he just happens to fall in love, which does happen to people, as we know. So he's got to decide whether he wants to go back to his real life.
To a steampunk love.
Yeah, so he wants to go back and let his mum know he's all right, because he's fond of his mum and he knows that she'll be worried because he's just disappeared into thin air, but he has fallen in love with Dr. Persephone Mockett. So is he going to stay with her in this new world, or will he go home to his mum? So we have to find out at the end of the book whether he gets back or not, or whether he chooses to stay.
Tell me about this. How does the two worlds fit together?
Well,
like,
this,
yes. Around us all the time and we just don't.
Well, that's very interesting, because Grahamstown, the book is actually set in Grahamstown. That's what the steampunk town is called. It's Grahamstown. So it's very similar to what we recognise as Grahamstown, but not quite, because obviously it's steampunk. So this whole new world is a steampunk world. Which kind of throws Kev off a bit, because he does realise that he recognises the ranges and a few of the other geographical features, but he hasn't quite put two and two together. And his best idea is that there's been an apocalypse of some description and the world has had to start over, and this is how society has moved on, and then suddenly they realise he comes from a whole different dimension. So the way that I envisioned it is that time is like a river, so it's flowing forward all the time. But if an event occurred that was catastrophic enough, it could separate time into two separate streams, and they would go off and develop their own worlds, if you like. But here in Grahamstown, and you can feel it when you walk through the streets, the past is very close to the present. So Grahamstown is one of those places where if you pushed hard enough, you could break through the time fabric and you could end up in another dimension, which is what has happened to Kev accidentally, and nobody quite knows how to get him home. So they have to build a special time machine that will not just take him through time, but actually warp the time-space continuum enough for him to get home to the right place. So that's a conundrum as well. Can they do it? It's actually illegal for them to do that. Time travel is very strictly regulated and well enforced in this world because of the difficulties that you might have with disrupting time. So they're actually doing something a little bit against the law to get him home, and he has to come up to the point where he decides it's worth the risk, to putting all his new friends at risk by breaking the law on his behalf. So it's an interesting story on his journey. Is quite interesting.
So tell me about this Walter character.
Yes, so Walter's a little bit of a character that occurs periodically through the book. He's the link between the first book and the second book, which is the sequel. We find out what happens to Kev at the end of the second book. But Walter's the link between the two. So he's a time traveller from the steampunk world who accidentally gets lost in our world. He disappears from that steampunk world and no one's ever heard of him before, since then. And he was a one-time lover of Dr. Elspeth. So what happens is that Kev bumps into him when he gets back here. So Walter is the tie between the two worlds, and does Walter help Kev make a time machine to get back to the steampunk world? Yeah, we wait with bated breath. I think we kind of know the answer to that already because there is a sequel. So
does Kev meet Walter in this?
He does. So yes, no, he does. I don't like to give away too much because it's supposed to be a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of the book. But yes, he does. He does meet Walter. He bumps into him accidentally here in this world, and of course, eventually he puts two and two together and realises this is the Walter that they've all been talking about that helped him here in the other world. Yeah. So Walter's been living here in our reality for a long time. And
so describe the steampunk Grahamstown.
Okay, so it's very much as you would experience it if you walk through Grahamstown today. The Junction Hotel is there. There's a lot of other things that we will recognise if we walk through, but of course technology is more advanced. So we have a lot of steam-driven and clockwork automatons and things like that. Obviously time travel is a thing in this world, but it's not in ours. We don't know how to do that yet, but they do in this reality. So you would see a lot of automatons doing various jobs. Mining is still the main industry here.
Gold mining.
Yeah, gold mining. So it's a very prosperous town. And so the infrastructure of the town is probably more advanced than what you would expect to see in the time period that we might have set in our world. But in all other respects, it's Grahamstown. So the ranges are there up behind the town, and there's everything that you would recognise from living in Thames you would recognise in this reality. And it comes more into play in the second book. So this is the second book, Back in Time. So I've actually really have set this really much more strongly in the Coromandel Peninsula. So when Kev comes back, sorry to give away the secret, but he does come back. So when he comes back not in Grahamstown. There's a glitch with the time machine that he and Walter have yeah. So it can't be simple. He doesn't come back to Grahamstown. He's expecting to, but he gets deposited on the other side of the Firth. And so he's got to make his way back to Grahamstown. And of course in those times it wasn't drained farmland. So he has to make his way through a strange Hikatea forest landscape with wetlands and find his way back to Grahamstown as he knows it. But he gets a bit of help along the way. And he finds out that the steampunk world's a little bit dangerous, much more dangerous than he expected, and he's got to learn a whole lot of new skills if he's going to survive. And in this book too, we have a dangerous enemy that's not, he's kind of hinted at in the first book because of the time slavers, but there's a dangerous enemy in the second book who comes more to the fore, and they have to defeat him in order for life to continue as it is in Grahamstown. So all of the town is under threat from this mysterious enemy. So, and Kev, of course, he's got a part to play in it as well, you know. So
he's like the hero of the story.
He's kind of a little. No, actually, the hero of the story is a little automaton monkey called Norman. But I'm not going to give away too much of my stories, otherwise you won't need to read the books. So yeah, but Kev does play his part.
So all these crazy little characters just sort of.
Yes, they do. So, and there's a lovely little character called Nellie Sprocket, who is a very peaceful, gentle, creative soul who's a bit of a spy. So there's a whole lot of new characters crop up in the second book.
So the big question.
Yes.
Is any of your characters based on real people?
Actually, they are.
You're not going to tell us.
Well, Nellie Sprocket is based on a friend of mine who's got a beautiful singing voice and is very kind of creative and artsy, and she does know it's her, and she actually asked if I could put her in a book. So I said, well, actually I've got an idea for a character that is coming into the second book, but he was going to be a boy, but I can make him a girl just for you. So that's how Nellie Sprocket was born. So based loosely on a friend of mine. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yes, my whole family make an appearance. So, to a lesser or greater extent, because you start off by basing, a character on someone, but they quickly take on their own life, and they become the character themselves rather than who you've based it on. So when I say that, I also think there's a little bit of me in every character, so they've become an amalgamation of all kinds of people. But Phineas is based on my husband, so if you meet my husband, you've met Phineas to a certain extent.
You're going to have to get all these people together and dress them up.
I actually have on my profile, not my profile picture. What's the other one you call it? The big one behind on my Facebook.
The banner.
Yeah, on my Facebook page there is a little black and white photo of all of my family dressed up in steampunk. So I think probably the closest character to the real person would be the character of Mina Myra McGill, and she is very much like one of my granddaughters, and sometimes word for word the conversations that come out of Mina's mouth I'm transcribing from a conversation with my granddaughter. So she isn't. She's a bit of a hard case, obviously. So yeah.
And how old is she?
Well, at the moment she's 8.
Yeah, beautiful. What about Walter? Is he based?
No, Walter is totally made up because I had to make up a character that I could link When the idea of the sequel came up, I had to find a way to link the two books, so I had to create Walter right from scratch. So he's a bit mysterious to start with for that reason, because I didn't have a really well-formed backstory for him until almost when I was writing the sequel. So.
And what about Kev?
Kev is based on a real-life character. He is a person that we know in our family who doesn't like steampunk at all. So how do you explain a person in your family who doesn't like steampunk?
Does he know he's at this?
No, he has got no idea.
Okay,
So keep that quiet.
How ironic, he hates steampunk.
Yes, so now he's immortalised in a steampunk novel.
That's awesome, I love it. It's like the ultimate revenge.
It kind of is the ultimate revenge. But it is also born out of the idea I had to explain him somehow. So yeah. Then I came up with the idea that, you know, what would happen if you did have a character like that in a steampunk world who had no idea what he
stumbled into.
No, didn't know how to cope with anything. You know, it's all beyond his comprehension. So that's how Kev was born.
Oh, how wonderful!
Yeah.
That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And what about, like, do you find that when you're writing, like, as I know when I was starting to do it, I would have these ideas just pop into my head out of nowhere, or this line,
yes,
and it's going, that's a great line, and just jot it down, but you don't know where it's supposed to go.
I do that more now because
you're in that creative.
Yes, and because Out of Time was the first thing I'd ever written, like I hadn't written anything before that, so I'm not a practiced writer in that respect. I know a lot of authors do keep notebooks and they keep very detailed notes about characters and plot ideas. I do it more now because, you know, I want to capture especially little funny little sayings that I hear, or somebody told me something the other day and I thought, oh, I've just got to make a character about somebody like that, you know, because that just sounds, oh, I do know what it was now, remembered. I'll write it down when I get home. Because I thought, I'm going to make a character where I can use that concept because that is such a hilarious idea. So yes, I think I'm more aware of it now, but I'm really a writer who I don't really know where the story's going until I get to the point where I'm writing it. I've got a generalised idea of where it's going, but yeah, it is. It's very much.
With my stories, I just have an idea and I didn't know what was going to happen to them, or
no, exactly.
And I just start writing, and then it just unfolds, and you just.
That happened to me very strongly in Back in Time. I had an idea how the book was going to end for a certain character. I had set up at the start of the book his conflict and what was happening and going on in his world, and I had a very definite idea of how I was going to resolve that for him at the end of the book. And then halfway through, it was like he spoke to me and I knew that wasn't the end of his story. And to be honest, personally, I struggled with that the whole rest of the way through the book because that's not what I wanted for him. But it just happened. And I got some very good advice from my son, and he said, look, it will just happen. You'll know when you write it, you'll know what's the right thing to do. And honestly, to the end, until I put the full stop at the end of the story, I did not know how it was going to end. So it was a very organic process for me. But I actually enjoy that. That's the exciting part about being a writer, I think. And that's the part I think perhaps makes books readable, is that there's an immediacy and a spontaneity in the story that the readers can pick up on, and it becomes very exciting for them as well.
So it unfolds for the author of the book in much the same way as it unfolds for the reader.
Yes, it does. I think so. Well, for me it does. That's how the process is for me. You know, that sometimes I've got no idea what the conversation between the characters is going to be until they have it. And they surprise me. Every time they surprise me with the things they come out with. And they tell me things about themselves I hadn't realised about them before, even though I'm the one who created them. They are telling me as much about themselves. Yeah. They're very real to me in my head, like they're like real people, so it becomes very much a part of yourself. Well, yes, partly. I have to actually qualify that and say they started off like real people, but actually they're now, they're not the real people now.
That's awesome. That's awesome.